Hey Emma,
Yes, Madelyn.
what do you call a funkadelic dance party to which only the numbers 1, 3, 5, and 7, and 9 are invited?
I don't know. What do you call it?
An odd disco. Hello, and welcome to Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
I think you got that one.
Yeah.
I think you figured.
I like the word funkadelic. That's a good one.
Just came to me because I didn't want to say 70s because of course the number 70 is I should have done something with like 71, 73, 74, 5. Dang it.
Maybe you should have, but now I have funkadelic added to my lexicon, so
I don't know if
it ends well.
It's strictly a real word or not. I have not looked it up, but I do like funkadelic.
It's a real world. It's a real word once you make it a real word.
You're right, Emma. That's a good way to think about grammar and vocabulary in general.
Yeah, that's how English was made.
Well, folks, I'm your Funka host, Madelyn.
I'm your adelic host, Emma.
I think we got 2 U's in there. I think that was Funkadelic.
That's
which
fine.
I kind of like that too. And thanks for tuning in this week. You probably didn't get this from the joke this week. I don't think the joke was quite as like, here are the games, as it usually is. So this week, we're going to be talking about Oddworld, and we're going to be talking about Disco Elysium.
Yep.
So if you figured that out from the joke alone and not from previous podcasts, then kudos to you. I think I hit it well this week. It's not my usual week where I'm like, team buddies, go to Crash Team Racing. It's my joke thing.
Sure.
Well, do you wanna travel to the world of Odd?
Sure, let's go.
So, Oddworld is a series of games developed by Oddworld inhabitants. The first released, Oddworld Abe's Oddysee.
Yes.
Released for PlayStation and PCs in 1997. And then ported to Game Boy as Oddworld Adventures the following year, and then ported to PS3 and such sometime in the 2010s. Mm-hmm. And then remastered as Oddworld New and Tasty in 2014.
I think that was by Just Add Water as the developer on the remaster.
Absolutely. Listeners, I came this close to, for the second time in a row. Didn't I not play the game 2 times ago as well?
It was the Maneater 999 week, which I think was 2 episodes ago.
You're
2
right.
full episodes ago.
Because I had already played Cooking Mama and Animal Crossing. I didn't have to go out of my way, so it didn't make as indelible an impact as my usual game experiences do.
Right.
But I came this close to not doing it, and then my internet at my new apartment did get set up in time for me to download it. Just barely. So I did play about 45 minutes or so of Oddworld New and Tasty on the PS4. I could have gotten the original. I could have gotten Oddworld Abe's Oddysee. I have to pronounce it like that. I can't say Odyssey, or you might think that I'm saying the word Odyssey, but I'm in fact saying Odd-Y-C. And even that didn't really clearly convey the spelling.
No, the C was confusing.
Odd-Y. Oh, I see.
Yes.
That made it worse. That made it sound like it was 4 letters. Oh, man. Digging the hole deeper and deeper. Anyway, I could have played the original, but the reviews that I was reading of the new one were like, man, the original is kind of clunky now and really hard. And
well, it came out in 1997, so...
I mean, of course it's kind of clunky now. I didn't mean that as a knock on the game, but they were like, it's really hard, and there aren't that many checkpoints. And I was like, oh, the new one has more checkpoints? Great. That's good. We're going to go with that one.
Yeah.
Because if you've listened to the show for any length of time, you'll know that I have very little tolerance for repeating things over and over.
Yeah, I was watching a review that pretty much described it as that kind of platformer, right? Where it's less about, like, your skill and more about, like, figuring out the right way through certain things so that you die a lot in, like, trial and error, or by just, like, running into a trap that you didn't know was there, which I thought, like, that's not Madelin's kind of game.
It's not. And to be fair, I'm thinking of playing Katana Zero for the podcast. I did have a good experience with a game that was built around that kind of mechanic of you just try over and over and over. And from the 45 minutes that I was playing Oddworld, Abe's Oddysee, I did die a fair bit. Some of it intentionally. I could not handle my alien friends dying if I could save them. Anyway, I should probably take a step back and talk a little bit about what this game is and what it's about and why my alien friends, although they're not aliens, right? They're native to this planet, just not our planet. I should probably talk a little bit about why my alien friends were dying before I just jump right into my game impressions. So Oddworld, the Oddworld games, as Emma said, they're like puzzle platformers, basically, right? Is that how you would describe it? Puzzle platformer?
Yeah.
That all take place on a planet not called Oddworld, believe it or not, but called Mudos. Mudos? Who knows?
Probably Mudos.
As you'll get from all of the names that I'm about to say, everything feels like it was named by someone's, like, 6-year-old son. Coming up with, like, funny blah blah names for the aliens.
Hey, come on. I mean, almost every sci-fi is pretty much that, right?
I just felt like this one was especially bad.
Like...
Not that there's anything wrong with that. I just felt like it was especially like, oh wow.
No, I'm just saying, like, some of the Star Wars planets also are a little bit like, who named this?
Fair enough. Anyway, they all take a place on... Actually, so it is Oddworld, and then the continent of Mudos. Much of which has been just, like, ripped of all its resources by industrialists, right? And in each of these games, in Abe's and Oddysee, you of course play as Abe, and then in Abe's Exodus, you also play as Abe, and then there's other ones that you're going to play as in later games. But you play as one of the Mudokons, and your race of like, kind of really classically alien, but kind of on the body of an ape. Does that feel like the right description? It sort of does.
Sure.
Ish. You're like an alien monkey thing. The alien gorilla thing. You've been enslaved by the Glucons, and you like work under them in factories and under their servants, the Sligs, and all of the names include this many G's and K's.
Yes. I
feel like that's how you know that things are made up, because there are just not that many G's and K's in words that we use.
Until you get to, like, I think Russian has a lot of G's and K's.
Sure, fair enough. I mean, I'm sorry, forgive me, I meant in English.
Sure.
There are not that many G's and K's.
Yeah.
But as a Mudokon, you have the admittedly kind of confusing how you ended up as slaves, but whatever, power of mind control. And so using that and the power of platforming and puzzle solving, you're gonna make a better life for you. And
now,
so
specifically, this is triggered for Abe because he discovers that the meat processing company that he works for is going to start using the, what is it again? The Mudokons, as their next meat source, because the meat that they have previously been making, they've been driving all the animals extinct, basically.
And profits are down.
Yes. So they've decided to use their workers as meat in something that is not at all metaphorical.
I mean, so I was playing it and my boyfriend was watching and he was like, wow, like, it's ahead of its time. And I was like, yeah, but like also meat packing being bad goes back a long way.
Sure, but I actually watched a whole, 25-minute interview with Lorne Lanning from December, actually.
One of the head designers.
Yes, he's now he's like the chief creative officer of the company.
Oddworld Inhabitants is the name of the company.
So he was doing interviews specifically because there's Oddworld Soulstorm coming out in a year or something, which is a remake of...
Maybe.
Yeah.
Oddworld Soulstorm has been in development for 5 or 6 years. So they're saying it's coming out. but we'll see.
Okay. I don't know why you needed to stick that in there, but whatever.
Sorry.
It's coming out. There's been trailers and stuff for it recently. And so he's been doing talks about that. So he was going back through working on the first game in an interview with Ars Technica. And it was just, like, they showed him in this interview, and then they cut back to an interview with him from 1997, where he's talking about how, like, he used to work as a truck driver for one thing, so he would get all this, like, food that would then have to get thrown out because nobody would buy it and stuff like that. And he was talking about, like, all the social issues that he's concerned about and all the bad things of corporations. And he's talking about it in 2019 and 1997. And I was watching it, I was like, man, it's just so refreshing to see a game developer being like, hell yeah, there's politics in my video game. Deal with it. You know? Like, back in 1997, and now. And people can't say that there's politics in their games where there are clearly politics. And it's just nice to see someone who's just like, yeah, there are politics there. And this carries over to Disco Elysium,
I was going to
so
say,
we can touch on that there.
It's political games week here on Tech This.
But it's just so, because, like, you look at Oddworld and you're like, this feels a bit political, right? And it's nice to, like, go see the developer where they're like, yeah, it is, as opposed to being like, no, I mean, if you draw this conclusion, that's great, but I didn't put it there.
It's about alien meat. They did have a very efficient plan for, like, they were not going to let anything go to waste for the Mudicons, to be fair. So, like, just credit where credit's due to the glucons. Like, they were not wasting a bit of that Mudicon meat.
Sure.
That is great, though. I mean, I guess that's what you get when you get a developer who, well, in this case, has a job, but thinks about things that are not games.
Yeah. He talked about working as a truck driver, and then he worked in visual effects for movies, actually. And then he came up with the idea, actually, for a quintology of games.
It's quintet or pentology.
Whatever.
But we're making up words this week, that's fine. Quintology. It doesn't have any G's or K's in it, so it's fine.
That obviously didn't exactly come to fruition. Partially because their publisher, or the way he describes it is their publisher really wanted them to get another game out by Christmas the next year, because other games had fallen through the previous year, basically. So they didn't... Abe's Exodus wasn't the second installment that they wanted it to be. So now Soulstorm is supposed to be, now they're actually going to be making it,
Yeah, the whole reading I was doing about, what counts in the pentology, quintology, it's a little bit confusing. Because Abe's Exodus is a direct sequel to Abe's Oddysee, but they don't count it. But Soulstorm is, partially a remake, and they've released 4 games, but only 2 count. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like they made part of what they wanted to make of the second installment. The way he laid it out is it felt like he has the whole quintology, and when he was pitching it to people, that's what he laid out. He didn't just lay out the first game. He was like, we're using quintology now, so you can stop making that face. But he had the whole 5 games laid out, and was asking for, a money plan for all of them when he was initially pitching it to people.
That's so bold. That's wild.
Yeah. Actually, it was funny because he told, his other... I think he was talking to his other creative partner, and she was like, let's make movies out of it. And he was like, no, we can make games out of it and ask for way less money. Because it's way cheaper to make games back then than making movies.
Oof, buddy.
So it was $500 million versus $25 million.
That's funny.
Isn't it funny?
Poor man. I was imagine somebody being like, we should make a movie, and him being like, actually, I want to ask for less money.
Yeah. Well, it's like a thing of like nobody's gonna give us that much money.
Oh, I get
to make this versus maybe we can ask for this much money for it. But yeah, it's just from what I've seen of the first game, I watched like a little bit of like a long play of it on YouTube, and it's pretty, I mean, I guess I always forget what games came out, in like 1997, but like the style of it, and especially that first opening cinematic, even in the original game, is pretty still, like the aesthetics carry it, right? So it still even kind of looks pretty impressive. I mean, not against things, but considering it came out in 1997, it feels like it still looks impressive.
Absolutely. And like I said, I played a little less than an hour of the 2014 remaster, which mostly seems to have made, I mean, obviously updates the graphics, although it's still,
It seems like it's added another, because I was looking at the different long plays, and they had, like, including rescuing all number of, I keep forgetting what they're called.
Mudokons.
And I think in the original there's like 100, and in the new one there's like...
Oh, no, there are like 290 some.
Yeah. So they've added more of them.
So, I enjoyed the bit that I played. I'm going to go back and play more, probably. If I can keep myself from starting Yakuza for another few days, at least. But so what I'll say is that maybe there are more cutscenes that come and continue to make the politics clear, but, the game just feels like a puzzle platformer, right?
Sure. I don't know if you really need more than that opening intro to make the politics clear. Right. I think you mean, like, advance the narrative.
Yeah, right? And that's what that's basically the point that I wanted to make, that it really only took 2 minutes of framing at the start to make the entire action of the game political, and if you cut that 2 minutes of framing, the game would still be fun. I'm enjoying the game, but it's not like, it's like screaming at you the entire time, like, corporations are bad corporations, bad meat packing, the whole time, or anything like that.
Well, I mean, you could argue that, like, all the traps are mostly, like, hazardous workplace conditions, right?
Not like real, like, there are bombs that I have to defuse.
Why are there bombs there,
Like, I guess you're right, but I think that goes about a step beyond what I'm supposed to think of as realistically.
Okay,
like,
sure.
I blew myself up timing it badly, defusing the bomb, like, 5 times in a row. That doesn't feel like a realistic, workplace thing to me. I could be wrong.
Hey, it's sci-fi,
You're right. Maybe the bombs serve some kind of functional purpose. Unclear.
They blow up the meat or something.
Why would you want to do that? But
I don't know.
Fair enough. Pre-cook the dumb Mudokons that walk over the bomb like me. So anyway, walking it back, so I started to talk about my gameplay experience, and then I was like, wait, we have to actually talk about what the game is. So basically what you do is, like I said, it's some light platforming, and in each there's like checkpoints, although in the remaster, and this is a little bit controversial, I imagine, for fans of the original and fans of purists and that kind of thing, but in the remaster you can sort of set your own checkpoints. Which is not something that I took advantage of very much in this first 45 minutes, because there was just nothing that I just wasn't that invested in anything, right? There was nothing that I was that far from a checkpoint. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't playing for long enough that I got too frustrated when I died a bunch of times. But you are trying to escape from this factory after discovering that you're next on after discovering Soylent Green is Mudokon.
Yeah.
And along the way, you encounter your enslaved brethren. There's better terminology for that now, but they're fictional aliens, so I'm going to let it go. And using the game's game speak, which I imagine was pretty revolutionary at the time, was a cool... no, I just mean, like, it's a cool mechanic.
Yeah.
That is a little bit less cool, like, less unique cool in 2020.
Sure.
But I can imagine in 1997 being, like, pretty dope. And you get to, like, you have one that's like, hello, you have one that's follow me, you have one that's, hey, everybody, which gets all of your alien friends to pay attention to you. And
it must be added for the remaster,
that's new.
Actually.
And is a quality of life improvement that I fully support.
Yeah.
Because I cannot imagine, like, I guess if there were only 100 of them, so there were just less of them around in general, that it might not be as necessary, but I can imagine that being supremely frustrating.
Yeah.
You could only lead one at a time in the original. So you can tell them to follow you or stay where they are and then get their attention, one of them or all of them.
Hello!
Exactly.
Hello!
Follow me! And everything. I really should have been doing this whole podcast, like, fully up nasal in my nose. Because that is the voice of Abe the entire time. He's like this the entire time. Aren't we all glad we got to hear that? I am.
It was very good.
Anyway, you're trying to lead them to these, like, magical freedom portals, basically. And you don't want to get caught by the guards. And you do some jumping, and you do some pulling levers, and you do some killing guards with meat saws, and all the good things that revolutionaries do.
All those things.
And I enjoyed it. I did. The puzzles already were, decently clever for me being only in the, like, first couple of levels, basically, or whatever that means for this game. It does make me worry about how difficult things will be later on, given that there were already some that was like, oh, I'm having a little bit of trouble with.
I mean, I definitely saw the original described as incredibly hard, to the point where it felt unfair at some points.
So part of the reason that it's hard, and this is something that seems to have still carried over into the remaster, probably intentionally, is that Abe is kind of clunky. He's got some heft to him. Not really in terms of character design, but he's not, like, perfectly responsive or perfectly, like, he doesn't stop the moment you stop and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which is interesting to me to think about, how much of that was intentional in 1997 and how much of it was just, like, that's what they could do.
I mean, they definitely wanted to make, in the interview I watched, he talked about wanting to make Abe feel weaker than your average hero, right? Like, one of the design issues was that they really did not want to give him a gun, so they had to figure out what other ways he could, fight in the environment without giving him a gun. Apparently one of the first suggestions was like, how about a bow and arrow? And he was like, that's the same thing.
That would be incredible. Walking around with a bow and arrow.
But, I mean, so there was an initial conception that he's supposed to feel weaker, but that might have come across as clunky within the game, right?
Which makes sense. That's interesting. I respect their choice to not give him a gun, although he certainly inflicts plenty of death and violence.
Yeah.
Without it.
Yeah.
I did get a trophy for accidentally killing one of my friends, by the way.
No.
Before it had taught me that I was supposed to save them, it's like, pull this lever, and then one of them dies.
No.
Whatever. Doing it for the platinum. But yeah, I mean, definitely the guards have gotten, well, they've fallen through a hole, wherever that takes them, presumably into some kind of molten meat. And they've also gotten chewed up by a meat saw.
Yeah, I think the idea was less like, we want to make a non-violent game, and more, we want Abe to be fighting back through more than just, I'm a cool gun dude. You know?
And that's something I respect. And again, something that is going to kind of carry over into there's some weird similarities between our games this week.
Yeah, yeah.
So, a couple of other, the quality of life changes that they've made in the remaster, despite the fact that I obviously have not played the original, right? They're smartly done, is what I'll say. So it's fully side scrolling. I mean, it's always side scrolling, but it's just fully continues to scroll. There's not screens. Which I can definitely see how that would be really annoying, and how you would like walk into traps that you didn't see if it was just like screen shifts. They've also given you an unlimited supply of bottle caps, which don't do anything. You can kind of throw them to make the guards look a different way or potentially move a different way. And as someone who, one of my least favorite things about like stealth games and stealth platformers and stuff is when I like miss my opportunity and I have to wait another 45 seconds for the guard to do their whole pacing thing.
Right.
Even though I know what I have to do, but I just have to keep waiting and waiting and waiting. And that's a hard thing to fix, right? Like, the guards have to move on fixed paths. They can't just, like, stand looking away. Yeah. You can't just be like, I click a button that's like, I see how I do it. And then the guard goes and looks the way they're supposed to look. I wish. That's my ideal quality of life improvement. At least being able to throw the bottle caps can, like, speed up that process a little bit. Which I was already appreciating with just like the half hour, 45 minutes of gameplay that I was having. And then, yeah, obviously being able to get them all to follow you. It's like, why didn't you do that the first time? Well, probably because the hardware couldn't handle that. But like, right. Why didn't you do that the first time? Imagine having to like walk 3 of these different guys the same path. How many times would I accidentally meet saw myself because I'm terrible at games? So many.
So many.
But it's just like, I don't know, this show doing this show with you is always so enlightening to me, because there are so many games that get great reviews that exist out there that I had never heard of. Yeah. And
I'd heard of this specifically from, like, a State of Play sometime this year, or one of those shows, because there was a trailer for Soulstorm. I don't remember specifically what it was, but it was one of the many myriad of digital shows we now have instead of conventions.
Yes.
And I was like, ooh, what's that? And so I looked it up, and then that's how it ended up going on the list, because I hadn't heard of it before then. Because I was a little baby child in 1997.
You were. I'm not even sure. Wait, let me see the exact date it released, if I can find it. I don't know. Maybe it says on the other page. But you might not even have been born. No, you were. You were very baby.
I was very baby.
You were very, very baby. Is it true that they sort of stopped doing this for a while because they decided they were going to make movies again?
I think he went back into the movie making business. I don't know if the whole company did. For a while.
Wow, did you know that Oddworld was nominated for a Grammy?
That's pretty cool.
With the release of Abe's Exodus the Movie, a short film combined with cutscenes from Exodus.
Hey, why not?
Wild. And the whole franchise has sold 7 million copies. It's just crazy to me. I don't know. You feel like you know all games. And you don't.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how it works.
I know that's a dumb thing to say, but it's just like, oh, like, this is a game that had a bunch of sequels and was well-liked and had, like, a well-reviewed HD remaster and stuff, but all of that happened before my, like, re-entry into gaming consciousness, and so I know nothing about it.
Yeah.
Well, folks, I feel confident in recommending, like, Oddworld is, the stuff I've gotten has been fun. If you're looking for something that's just, like, puzzly and you can save at any time, and it's going to bend your brain a little bit, but not too much, I'd recommend this one. It was only $20. It's on PS4. Quick and easy download. Good stuff. So, are you ready to talk the game Emma's been playing?
I'm ready.
Go!
Wait, no, let me roll my dice. Am I actually ready?
Oh, what skill are we checking here?
What skill are we checking? Maybe encyclopedia or composure, maybe?
Take us to the disco, Emma.
So Disco Elysium is a 2019 role-playing game from Zaum or Zaum. I don't actually know how you say it out loud.
It's definitely one of those.
In which you play as a man who wakes up in a hostel with just his underpants on, presumably from some sort of drunken bender, who quickly realizes that he has somehow forgotten everything about himself and his life and what he's doing there. But it turns out that he is a detective, and there's theoretically some sort of murder that he probably should have been investigating like several days ago, but hasn't gotten around to.
My bad.
And now, without his memory, and with only a customized series of skills that the player has given him, must solve the mystery, basically. And also gain his partner's undying trust and friendship.
If you're Emma.
But yeah, it's very, despite being a video game, it's very classic tabletop RPG.
Yeah, I was going to mention, so Disco Elysium is really heavily inspired by tabletop stuff, tabletop RPGs.
Yeah.
Because it's based on something that they've made previously, right? Like, this world existed for some kind of tabletop game that they had already fleshed out.
It says that the Robert Kurvitz had come up with it as a setting for a tabletop role-playing game. I don't think it was ever actually published as a tabletop role-playing game.
Fair enough. Well, Disco Elysium came out this past fall, in October, for PC. Came out for Mac in April, so I guess I have no excuse to not have played it, except that I don't have space on my Mac for a game.
It's more expensive than Oddworld. I understand why you went for that one.
Fair enough. Well, I knew you were playing this one, so I was like, I gotta cover all our bases.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I thought that it was already out on consoles, but it's not.
It's not yet, yeah.
Coming soon.
Yeah, I was going to wait for it to come out on console before I played it, but they did release an update that pretty much, like, entirely lowers the computer settings you need to have to play it, so even my Surface can play it smoothly, with just the quality stuff turned down a lot, basically. So I thought, and it was on sale, so I thought, like, oh, I'll just buy it on Steam. Why not?
I did like that the big tagline for the game, well, I don't know, I had thoughts about the fact that the big tagline for the game is, "What kind of cop are you?"
Yeah. Yeah, so as a RPG, it does allow you to play pretty much in any style that really suits you, right? But at the same time, I've felt that there are certain, like, as you're expressing your politics in the game, of which there are many times to do so, there are certain types of politics that you're allowed to express, but the way that it's written kind of carries across the way the developers feel about those sorts of people at the same time, right? Like, I feel like it manages to... I mean, of course, any game, if you've got stupid people playing it, you're gonna get stupid people misinterpreting it, right? But I feel like it manages to walk that line where it lets you be a horrible, racist jerk without, like, being a horrible, racist jerk is cool, actually. You know?
Yeah, that is always the trick in games of... You can get away with doing a lot of bad stuff as your protagonist, but as long as you still look kind of fly, kind of funkadelic, it's easy to kind of forget that, you know, obviously the obvious one is, like, it's easy to forget that you've murdered thousands of people, but there's lots of other subtle things as well.
Yeah.
So the one kind of cop that Disco Elysium doesn't let you be is, like, a violent cop or a combat cop. Violent, I will take off the two. Maybe it does let you be violent. But there is no combat in this RPG.
You can punch a child.
Great.
But he does kind of have it coming.
No. You can't say that.
I didn't punch the child. I don't have any points in my I think it's motorics, no, or maybe, no, my physique. I don't really have any points in my physique, so I'm not very much of a combat cop. But there are definitely skills that have to do with your ability to move in all sorts of situations.
So, Emma, if it's an RPG with no combat, what do you actually do in the game?
You roll a lot of dice. Your first task is getting dressed, and within your room, there are several ways to accidentally kill yourself because you fail a roll.
Great. Incredible.
Most of them have to do with the fan, because your tie is stuck on your fan. So you can roll to see if you can just grab it.
Or if you get decapitated.
Yeah.
Neat.
Or you can turn the light on, but because you have such a hangover and you're kind of unhealthy anyway, if you don't have good pain tolerance, you'll just have a heart attack in the room. Killed by light.
This is so much weirder. Like, Emma has been texting me about this game for the past week, and reading about it for the show made it make a little more sense, but before I had read about it for the show, I was like, I don't understand what this game is about, even a little bit.
So, you have two stats that you have to manage. You have your health and your morale, and if either of those fall to 0, the game ends. You die. From whatever injury or mental breakdown that's been happening. And a lot of times, like, the things that are going to hurt you are kind of obvious, right? Like, you're like, oh, if I fail this, like, that'll hurt, probably.
Yeah.
But occasionally, like, you get a lot of, like, talking to yourself and talking to other people, and there's different lines you can say and stuff like that. So I had my character kind of casually think to himself, like, well, I'm just a no good person. And it was like, morale damaged, please heal yourself. Just in an internal thought. So they're out there waiting to get you. That's just a life lesson for you, you know? Don't think casual bad thoughts about yourself.
Seriously.
But yeah, a lot of it is just you're faced with conversations with people or different tasks you need to accomplish, and whether or not you can accomplish them is based on, like, your base stat in that particular skill that you need, and then the dice roll. So the higher your base stat, the easier the dice roll, because you need less in the dice to get it. Although always theoretically, no matter how high or low your stat is and how challenging it is, it's never totally certain or entirely impossible.
Yes, you can always roll a 20, right?
Snake Eyes always loses, so if you get double ones, then you fail whatever check, and double sixes always wins. So if you get double sixes, no matter what your stat is, you succeed that check, basically.
So it was interesting to me in reading about this game. At first I thought, oh man, it's another game that feels like a game we would have made from a mashup, right? Like if we had some kind of RPG, like, to be honest, if we had some kind of RPG and we had, like, oh my god, I can't remember the name of that terrible detective game. Not terrible, cult favorite detective game that just came out.
That just came out?
Their sequel, Deadly Premonition.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It feels like if we took, like, I mean, I'm picking Deadly Premonition because it has a detective, right? But it feels like if we took, like, a detective visual novel and mashed it with an RPG.
Sure.
This is what we would get.
Sure, yeah.
But the more I thought about it, the more it was like, no, it actually really what it does is, so, like, all RPGs, like most RPGs anyway, take the like, fighting part of tabletop games, right? And, like, the stats that you level up, like, your character for fighting stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And this one I feel like leans way more into, at least in my very limited Dungeons & Dragons experience, like what you actually do in those games, which is a lot of pretending to be a character and doing dumb skill checks with your dungeon master.
Yeah. That's definitely what this feels like. And I also like that a lot of the times, like, it's not even really a punishment when you fail a check. right? Like, sometimes that still unlocks a new course of action for you when you fail it, which, like, one of the initial things you have to do is, I think, trying to teach you that. So you have to go look at the corpse hanging in the backyard that's you were supposed to take down days ago, but apparently haven't done.
Sure, of course you do.
And so you have to go, well, you can theoretically pass it, I assume, but theoretically you're supposed to go fail the skill check to keep yourself from vomiting twice, that then, like, introduces you to, like, other mechanics within the game. But you have to go vomit in front of a child twice. So.
And then punch the child, am I right?
Listen, the child uses slurs, so he can handle a little punch. But my percent for that one was like 15%, so I wasn't gonna make a fool out of myself in front of this child again, so...
Again. Keyword, again.
Yeah, I did vomit in front of him twice, so...
But it made me think about, you know, why... Well, especially given, like, we've been talking about player identification a fair bit. I don't even know if it's really made it on the podcast, but we've definitely been texting about it and talking about it together off mic a fair bit. And it made me think about, you know, this is a game that really... Well, I don't know. You'd have to tell me if you feel like it makes you identify as the character, but it really definitely makes you roleplay in a way that most role-playing games don't.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely... Part of the reason is because I didn't find out his name until, like, 2.5 hours into it, right? Because he doesn't remember. But I definitely use I a lot when talking about him, which I do in games, too, but theoretically when I'm talking about it, when I'm not playing it, I'm using the character name, right? Whereas this, I tend to just be like, I did this. But I'm doing this.
Are you using I in the sense of, like, you, Emma? Or are you using I in the sense of, like, in a tabletop way of, like, I go to the inn and buy an ale?
I guess a mixture.
Yeah.
I mean, something I appreciate about this game is I don't like failing, right?
Word.
And I don't like picking choices where, like, it's, you know, like, usually in, like, a choice-based thing, I'm picking the choice that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in this one, it feels a lot freer to pick some of the zanier choices and try some of the zanier things going on, right? It just feels like it encourages that instead of, like, punishing you greatly for straying from the actual path that they want you to take, you know?
Totally. I did see in some of the reviews that the reviewers sort of felt like this is a game that really wants you to kind of pick a character and be consistent.
I guess so.
Does that line up with your experience?
I don't know. It doesn't, like, take choices away from you as you act as one thing, so... I mean, it certainly encourages you to choose the way that you're going to be approaching problems.
Right.
Right? Like, my character approaches problems through talking to people, as opposed to, you know, feats of physicality, whether that's fighting or something else. So... because I have more skill points in those areas, basically. So those checks are always more likely than other checks.
But see, I think that's cool, because I feel like in most games, and whatever, like, I've been, like, the most recent RPG, I guess, that I finished is Final Fantasy VII, right? Mm-hmm. And in that game, it's like, well, I can have high attack stat, or I can have high magic stat.
Right.
And that might affect my playstyle a little if I remember what weapon my character is using at a particular moment, and I'm not just doing it to get the ability and then going back to my usual weapon. But it doesn't affect anything else about how I play the game, right? Even in battles, it doesn't necessarily really affect how I play the game. Like, I'm mostly still just mashing buttons and doing triple slash over and over and over again. And I think it's fun to have found a way to make it really more role-playing.
Sure. I mean, there's definitely, like, they talk about Planescape Torment, which we've talked about on the show, too, as an inspiration. So if you go back to older style RPG games, and older style Western RPG games, I think in particular, you'll find more of this sort of stuff. It's just become, I think, less popular as a genre, as in the modern age of games.
And I wonder if that's just as RPGs have developed their own sort of separate genre flair that is a little bit separate from the tabletop games that they developed from. That's sort of what it feels like to me.
I mean, this is also harder to program.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Just on a base level. Like, you have to consider everything, and where things are affecting everything, and all that sort of stuff. Whereas in what you generally think of as a video game RPG, right, you like have your set story, and sure, you can affect how the people play, but it's going to play out this way, generally, right? Whereas in this, you have to have all these different branching things when they talk to each other.
For sure. I'm not saying it's not hard, but my goodness, can't we use a teraflop or two for this in the next generation?
Sure, yeah. Something that's also really cool, though, is, like, if my high stats are just triggering, like, all the time, right? So, like, you can just, like, he'll have thoughts to himself, or just within conversations, there'll be rolls and stats will trigger. So all of my high stats have a very real possibility of dragging me off into a long tangent of something random, right? Because, like, I have a high encyclopedia stat, so, like, my guy is just pulling random facts out of nowhere that don't pertain to the conversation, but that he's like, I know this. Like, he's just constantly playing Jeopardy with himself in his head.
Incredible.
Which is, yeah. So there's, like, a balance of, like, having high and low stats, and if you let something get too high, it will consume your brain, pretty much.
What a just fun game idea. They're just, like, it's, very rarely do we look at games on the show that I'm like, that's so unique. But I can't think of anything, I mean, obviously Planescape Torment involves some elements of this, but I can't think of very much that approaches it this way. It's cool. That's all. It's cool.
Yeah, it's been very fun. And even when I'm stuck on, like, one task, I have all these other tasks, and I can go talk to the old men and misinterpret, like, I think they were playing bocce, but I thought they were playing shot put. So,
why would you think that?
I don't know.
You're encyclopedic.
You know what? I decided not to ask them the rules, and I passed the check, so I threw the ball real far into the ocean. You know? Like, sometimes you pass all the checks and you've still done something stupid at the same time, which I also appreciate.
It's
right?
very relatable, too. Sometimes in real life you pass all the checks and you've still done something stupid.
Oh, you know the other thing? Other than encyclopedia, the other thing is I have high drama stat, which is, like, lying. So I'm very good at lying, but at the same time, I just randomly have impulses to lie. Right?
Oh,
like,
no.
just for no reason.
So really your character is like, here's a fact that I know, but it's a lie.
Yeah. So, like, we were supposed to check the serial number on the piece of armor that this corpse is wearing. And so I got it, and Kim was like, let me write it down. Can you tell it to me? And immediately my drama stat was like, random string of numbers, let's lie! And then I had to make a choice. And I had to be very careful to tell the truth because it was confusing me as to which one was the right one.
Oh, no.
Right? So I gave him the right serial number. I was like, no drama. Please sit down.
No drama.
We're not lying about the serial number.
So I saw that this has a TV adaptation in the works.
Does it? So do a lot of video games.
I mean, I know. And of course, having a TV adaptation in the works doesn't really mean anything, right?
Yeah.
But this feels like a game that would be a bad TV show.
I don't know. I mean, it has... The thing is, it has a lot more writing than a lot of video games, which automatically makes it easier to adapt, I think. There are less sections where it's supposed to be carried by the combat, right? A lot of video games, even narrative-heavy ones, like The Last of Us has an HBO show in the works, right? But a lot of The Last of Us is just going around as Joel and killing the zombies. Infected, whatever.
Yes, we can't
there's
call
like
them
long
zombies.
stretches of time between narrative events that works for the game's pacing, but would be hard to turn into something compelling in a TV show, in my opinion. Whereas this is all words, right? Like, it's written by a novelist.
Apparently it's based on a world from a novel.
Yeah. So it has a lot more things that feel easier to adapt, at least, than the typical video game.
Okay, I hear you, except that, okay, so like you said, if you're comparing The Last of Us getting a TV show to this getting a TV show, The Last of Us, like, you're gonna have to iron out the pacing, of course, because maybe it's all gonna feel too fast if you cut out all of that filler stuff, right? But when you cut out all that filler stuff, you have about the right amount of content for a season or two of a television show.
But you got real strange pacing.
Sure.
That's why all video game movies are weird.
You're right. However, what I feel like is different about this game is that, at least from your description of it, what sounds fun about this game is the element of the decision-making.
Sure, but I enjoy the story too, right? Like, the thing is, you have a lot of content, so you have a lot of adaptational choices to make, sure. So maybe it's hard in that way, but you have a lot of content, you have a lot of good content to choose from already, right? So you can craft a story that works compellingly on television from all the different things.
That's
like,
fair.
It's not like I wouldn't enjoy this game if it was a visual novel, like a straight visual novel. I like the characters, I like the setting, I like what's happening, you know?
Right.
It does make it more fun that I have all these different choices and there's all these, like, quirky stat things, like I can take off my pants so that I can jump better. It's tight around the thighs, so it makes it harder to move, basically. It's the justification for the
Sure,
lowering
of course.
that stat.
I guess what I'm saying is that I feel like you're right, that there's a lot more material there, but I just feel like it sounds like so much of the spirit of it is in that, like, ability to, like, create your own version of this story, that becomes a tightrope that is hard.
Well, it's like watching a Let's Play.
Sure. Yeah.
I disagree.
Fair
I'll
enough.
leave it at that.
That's
I think
fair.
you have to work hard on it, like you would with any TV show, but I think that it is easier to adapt overall than the standard video game.
I mean, you have played more of the game, so I'll defer to your judgment. I guess I'm just saying...
It'll be a fundamentally different experience from the game. Yeah. That's the important thing.
Which is probably good. I mean, maybe, honestly, for them, it's probably good that they are not able to adapt it in a straightforward way. It just feels sad to me to lose a little bit of that tabletop feeling to it that feels so...
Sure,
cynical.
yeah, it's a fundamentally different experience.
Yeah.
I think it's a fool's errand to be like... Ideally, if you're making a good TV show, it should feel like a fool's errand to be like, oh, but the game is better. It's like, no, the game's just a game. The TV show's a TV show.
Maybe they could do it like Scrubs style.
What?
You know how JD, like,
yeah,
has all those
I think you kind of
daydreams?
would have to. There's a lot of internal monologue.
Like, it would just have to be like, I could take off my pants and jump right now. And they'd be like, no. That's bad.
Kim didn't care.
That's all that matters.
He made me jump when he was like, I'll just climb down daintily.
Nice.
It's like, thanks, you could have mentioned that I could have done that too. No, I had to jump.
But you didn't. Well, are you ready to create a mashup?
I'm ready.
Okay.
No, I'm not. I'm really not, actually. Let's just skip it.
It's gotta be political. It's gotta take place... Disco Elysium takes place on a different planet, right?
You know, I'm not sure.
It's an alternate planet.
It might be like an alternate future kind
Okay.
of thing. But I guess that sort of counts as a different planet anyway.
Okay, so we've got sci-fi. We've got some political... We didn't really talk about the whole socialism element of Disco Elysium, but...
When they accepted their game awards, they thanked Karl Marx, so...
There you go.
There you go.
It's gotta have some leftist political... right? I mean...
Yeah.
leanings. No guns allowed.
Yeah, I still haven't found my gun, so I can't even use it if I wanted to.
It's gotta be about, you gotta care a lot about the well-being of your friend or friends.
Yeah. You want their undying trust.
I feel like there's I feel like there's some kind of like a cop angle to take on this. Of like...
Technically in Disco Elysium, you're not really a cop, you're more of a extra governmental military force
that's
cop
worse.
Thing.
I don't know, that's worse.
I didn't say it wasn't worse.
That sounds like cop, but with less rules.
Yeah.
So maybe it's still a side scroller. Let's make some choices. It's still a side scroller.
Okay.
And with branching paths, side scroller.
Yeah.
And let's see. I don't know how I'm gonna make it a platform. Like, based on... Okay. So there's, like, platforming levels, and based on how well you do in the platforming, right, or the puzzles, right, your character gains certain stats, right? So, like, if you're like me, like, you know, if you always kill yourself when your friend gets killed, like, maybe you gain compassion, but, like...
I was thinking more, I mean, maybe that also plays in, but it might be more like there are different routes through a level, right?
Yes.
And depending on your certain stats, you can try taking on one or the other, but some of them might be harder for you because you don't have as much stats in that area.
Yes, I like that. But if you take the harder level, maybe you gain stats in a different... Like, you take the harder path, you gain...
Sure, yeah.
You get, like, a bigger boost in that other area or something like that. That's interesting. That's interesting to me. What's the leftist story?
You're some sort of, like, revolutionary group, so maybe each of the levels is, like, a mission that you're undertaking.
Okay.
Or, like, some sort of demonstration that you're doing, or whatever.
Okay, I like the idea of it not just being, like, we're blowing up a reactor. That's fun.
Yeah.
Like, it's like some of them... Oh, that would be fun. So some of them are, like, platformers, like, you're literally infiltrating something, but some of them are, like, paperwork you know what I mean? Like, there's lots of, like, different...
Sure, yeah.
Like, the platformers aren't necessarily literally you platforming. Some of them are you, like, writing a petition, but expressed as a platformer. Does this make sense at all?
Yeah. I mean, no, but we could figure it out.
Yeah.
I don't know what that would look like, but we could think about it.
I don't know what it would look like either, but I feel like, and then you make choices based on, like, the language that you want the petition, but, like, you have to, like, get to that language.
Yeah. That's interesting.
You don't love it. It's okay. It can get cut in alpha.
It's just hard to conceptualize, right? We couldn't... That's not something I think we could thoroughly flesh out within this episode.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
Right now. But I think it's interesting for sure.
This is still kind of thin.
We don't have to come up with the whole plot. I'm not...
We need the
I'm
whole
not in the
quintology.
place where I can come up with like
Where is the end of the quintology, Emma?
I'm not in a place where I can come up with the sort of deep plot that both of these games, or at least the Oddworld series promises and Disco Elysium promises, right? I can't just spitball that off the top of my head.
Yeah, fair enough. Do we get like a not Bernie Sanders character in it?
No, it's not. What's that? There's like some parody game that's like Bernie Bros or something. Like Bernie Socialism Bros or something like that.
I do like the idea of like a choice-based platformer where the route that you take affects your character. That's kind of fun.
Yeah.
Kind of unique.
Definitely you'd have to think about it, because it would kind of suck to get stuck on like having to do certain routes because you have higher stats in those areas, right? So I think you'd have to make sure, like, it shouldn't just be like the smart route and the physical route, right? Like,
You're right.
it shouldn't just be like the puzzle and the platforming routes, which is like my initial gut thing is like you have the platformer route and the puzzle route with like the stats in those different areas. So you'd have to have like you'd have to come up with more of those, right?
There's like, but like
I just don't know what those would be.
Within platformer and puzzle, there are like different things though, right? Like you can have like the sneaking route. You could have the like fighting route versus the like complicated jumps route.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
I think you could solve some of this with good tutorialing. But you might also, between like platformy segments, do some dialogue stuff.
Yeah.
With your number 2 in command at this organization or whatever.
Well, I think it'd be nice to have some sort of like hub. Like I'm thinking of the platforming levels less as like one continuous thing, like Oddworld is. Like this isn't really pulling from either of them. This is just like
a game idea we have. Go on.
But like thinking of those as more like discrete like mission areas, right? With like the levels designed in different directions. So it'd probably be good to have some sort of like hub world, right, where you can talk to like your different members of this revolutionary group, and maybe you play as that's going a little far. I was just thinking like maybe you play as different characters.
Let's save that for the sequel.
Leave that. Yeah.
Although that would be interesting. Okay, so that would make this game huge, right? But an interesting thing to do with it, right, if unfeasible, is that you then could have, like, in the same way as you do in, like, an RPG, right, where you have, like, a magic user, and you have a tank, and you have a combat person, right, in your party. It would be interesting to have, like, different characters who you could, like, do, like, you would choose who you would send based on who was good at what.
Yeah. Now,
how that would affect the game is like, so if you do all the platforming levels, does that mean like you get more and more of, like, I'm thinking of that Celeste, you know, when they explained that, like, in Celeste you get that, like, bonus time?
Yeah.
In the game. So it's like, as you get better at the platformer, do you get more of that bonus time? But see, then that becomes interesting. This is such an interesting balance to me, because then if it's like, if I enjoy the challenge of the platformer and that's why I'm doing it, the more that I do it, actually, the less challenging those become.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Fascinating. So much to think about in this very complicated game that I'm crafting.
I mean, all the routes would get more challenging as the game progressed. Still,
of course.
Right? So it would theoretically still be challenging, even if you'd put your points into platforming. It just would be easier than if you hadn't, I guess.
That makes sense to me. This would take some major QA.
Sure, yeah.
Well, I'm happy with that. What's it called?
Jump Boys.
No. It's too gendered.
Jump Folks.
That sounds too much like Fall Guys.
That's true.
Haters to the left.
To the left. No.
Just kidding.
Whatever. We never come up with titles for the game.
I was just asking. Both of these ones have distinctive titles this week, so I was like, maybe it's Weird Mambo.
Sure.
Well, folks, what do you think of our mashup this week? Would you buy our, like, bizarro branching paths platforming RPG? Have you played Oddworld? What did you think of it? Are you playing a very different character than Emma in Disco Elysium? Did you
punch the child?
Did you punch the child? Are there more things from tabletop games you'd like to see come over more strongly into video games? If you have thoughts or answers to any of these questions and more, you should find us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Talk This Podcast, and on YouTube, also at Talk This Podcast. While you're on YouTube, you should check out our new series, Emma's new series, really, On Topic Corner, and also her long ongoing series, Play This. It's good stuff. Is Disco Elysium going to make it into any of those series, do you think?
I don't know. I'm only like 4 hours into it right now. I haven't finished the first day yet. I don't even know what will happen on the second day. I am leaving the corpse in the yard for another night. It is down from the tree, which is a good first step.
Nice.
But it's still in the yard. So we'll see how it goes. But I think it's supposed to be like a 30-hour game. And that's if I stop, like, failing and reloading, right? So, we'll see.
Well, speaking of things that you'll want to reload over and over again, you should check out our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can read more about the show, see the games and the hat that Emma's about to virtually pick from, and check out our blog, where you can read long-running series Clickbait Boyfriend, where my boyfriend is playing through the Kingdom Hearts series, and also Split Screen, where Emma and I are watching Coffee Prince and My Hero Academia. Plus other blogs.
Clickbait Boyfriend will end.
This week.
This week it shall end.
For the, billionth week in a row. I'm sorry, it's been a wild couple of weeks, listeners. If you've been waiting
I totally understand. I just think it's funny every time you say it.
I know. I was trying to just go through it this time without commenting, and of course... Thanks, Emma.
Sorry.
Anyway, if you love this kind of banter, and you never want to miss an episode, you should subscribe. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, Overcast, Pocket Casts, did I say Pandora Podcasts online and on the app? You can find us anywhere you can find a podcast, more or less. Well, Emma, you ready to pick the games for 2 weeks from now?
Yeah, you need to remind me to
put more games
these.
In the hat? Yeah. That's okay. It's good to clear out the backlog.
Sure, yeah. So our old game is Mirror's Edge.
Nice.
And our new game is Wattam.
Oh, that's a good excuse for me to get Wattam. I've been meaning to get Wattam.
There you go.
I don't need more games in my backlog, but I'm gonna do it anyway.
I'm pretty sure it's a pretty short experience, so...
Whatever. What it's really gonna make me do is play Katamari, so... Oh well, gotta play Katamari for the 100th time, no big deal. So listeners, that's 2 weeks from now. But next week, can you believe it? It's been 6 weeks again. Those 6 weeks just keep on coming.
They keep coming.
And we're going to be talking about what we've been playing the past 6 weeks. So it's a good time to catch up on what we've been up to think about what you've been playing the past 6 weeks, to look at that ever-growing stack of games, physical and virtual, and say, man, how have I not finished any of these? It's going to be a good time.
Would you like to sign us off, Madelyn?
Yeah, everybody. Thanks for tuning into another show. This week, I hope that all of the jumps that you take don't require you to remove your